The air beneath the Reich Chancellery smells of damp concrete and diesel oil. Overhead, the city burns. Soviet artillery pounds the ruins with methodical fury, each impact sending tremors through the reinforced walls 50 feet below ground. In this tomb of concrete and despair, a woman sits alone in a narrow corridor, her hands folded in her lap, her back straight despite exhaustion. She wears no uniform, only a simple gray dress stained with engine grease and dried blood. Her face, small and angular, bears the marks of recent injury, bruises darkening beneath her eyes, a bandage wrapped around her left temple. But her eyes, pale, blue, unwavering, stare at nothing, or perhaps at everything she has lost. Her name is Hanna Reitsch. She is 32 years old. She has flown over 40 different types of aircraft. She has tested machines that have killed men more experienced than herself. She holds the Iron Cross First Class, one of the few women in the Reich to receive such an honor. And she has come here, to this place of endings, not to escape, but to die. Above her, the city that once hosted the Olympic Games, that once echoed with Wagner and goose-stepped through parades of martial glory, is collapsing into ash and rubble. The Soviets are 6 miles away, perhaps 5. The Americans and British close from the west. The Third Reich, which promised 1,000 years, is entering its final week. And in this bunker, Adolf Hitler, the man who transformed a defeated nation into a continental empire, who gambled everything on will and iron, waits for the end he has authored. Hanna Reitsch has not come here by accident. She flew into Berlin 4 days ago, piloting a Fiesler F-156 Storch through a corridor of Soviet anti-aircraft fire so dense that witnesses on the ground could not believe the small aircraft survived. Her passenger was Robert Ritter von Greim, Luftwaffe general, summoned by Hitler for reasons no one fully understood. They landed on an improvised runway in the Tiergarten, the great park now cratered and burning. Soviet shells bracketed the aircraft as it touched down. Shrapnel tore through the fuselage. Von Greim was struck in the foot, the bone shattered, blood pooling in his boot. Hanna took the controls from the rear seat, guiding the crippled aircraft the final meters to safety. She did not hesitate. She did not flinch. This is who she has always been.
Now, in the bunker, she waits. Von Greim lies in the makeshift infirmary, his foot mangled, his future meaningless. Hitler has named him Commander of the Luftwaffe in place of the disgraced Erman Göring, a title without substance, a promotion in an empire of ghosts. But Hanna does not care about ranks or honors. She cares about one thing: to die beside the Führer, to seal her loyalty with the final sacrifice, to prove that faith, even in the face of apocalypse, has meaning. She has asked him, let her die first. Let her take the poison capsule before him, to show that she does not fear death, that she embraces it as the logical conclusion of devotion. She has asked this of Hitler, the man who inspired her to fly higher, to push beyond limits, to believe that human will could overcome gravity itself. She has asked to die. His response would not be what she expected. To understand Hanna Reitsch, to comprehend the fevered devotion that brought her to the Führerbunker in the war's final days, one must return to the beginning, to the girl who first looked at the sky and saw not a ceiling, but infinite possibility. She was born in 1912 in Hirschberg, Silesia, a region of forested mountains and ancient castles on the eastern edge of the German Empire. Her father was a doctor, stern and orderly, a man who believed in discipline and precision. Her mother was devout, a woman of quiet faith and rigid morality. Hanna was the eldest of 3 children, Small for her age, delicate in appearance, but possessed of a will that frightened even her father. As a child, she climbed to the highest branches of trees, crawled across rooftops, threw herself from the hayloft of a barn to see if she could land like a bird. She could not. She broke her collarbone. She did it again. She wanted to be a doctor, a medical missionary, to serve in Africa or China, to heal the sick and bring light to the darkest corners of the world. This was her dream, shaped by her mother's piety and her own intense, almost religious need for purpose. But then, at 13, she saw an airplane.
It was 1925. The Treaty of Versailles had forbidden Germany from possessing military aircraft, but civilian gliding clubs were permitted, encouraged even, as a way to keep the dream of flight alive. Hanna watched a glider circle above the Hirschberg Hills, watched it ride the invisible currents of air, silent and graceful, a thing of wood and canvas that moved as if alive. She felt something shift inside her, something fundamental. She no longer wanted to heal bodies. She wanted to fly. Her father forbade it. Flying was dangerous, inappropriate for a girl, a distraction from serious study. Hanna obeyed, at first. She enrolled in medical school in Berlin, but the pull of the sky was stronger than duty. She joined a gliding club in secret, traveling to the Wasserkuppe, the mountain in central Germany where glider pilots gathered to test their skills. She was the only woman. The men mocked her, doubted her, patronized her. She ignored them. She flew. She was a natural. Her small size was an advantage. Less weight meant better lift. Her reflexes were sharp, her spatial awareness uncanny. But more than skill, she possessed something rarer: absolute fearlessness in the air, a willingness to push the machine to its limits, to trust that the machine would obey if she understood it perfectly. By 19, she held the women's world record for altitude in a glider. By 20, she had given up medicine entirely. She would be a pilot or she would be nothing. In 1933, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. The National Socialists promised to restore German pride, to undo the humiliations of Versailles, to make the nation strong again. For Hanna, politics were secondary, but the Nazis offered something she craved: recognition for excellence, support for aviation, the promise that Germany would once again dominate the skies. She did not join the party, she never would, but she accepted its patronage. She flew in demonstrations, testing new designs, performing aerobatics that left audiences breathless. She became famous, a symbol of the new Germany, disciplined, fearless, unburdened by doubt.
In 1937, she was invited to join the Luftwaffe's testing program at Rechlin, the secret facility where the Reich's most advanced aircraft were developed. She was the only female test pilot, a novelty that generated resentment and admiration in equal measure. The work was brutal. She flew prototypes with unstable flight characteristics, engines that failed mid-air, designs that had already killed experienced pilots. She crashed repeatedly. She fractured her skull testing a dive bomber, spending 5 months in the hospital undergoing multiple surgeries to reconstruct her shattered nose and jaw. When she recovered, she returned to Rechlin and flew again. She believed that flying was not merely a skill, but a calling, a form of transcendence. In the cockpit, she was free from the limitations of Earth, from the smallness of human concerns. She was part of something greater: the machine, the air, the pure physics of lift and drag and thrust. And she believed that Germany, under Hitler's leadership, was destined for greatness, that the Führer's vision would lift the nation to heights unimaginable. She never questioned this. Doubt was weakness, faith was strength. But what soldiers fighting for the Reich expected: glory, conquest, the swift triumph of superior will, and what they experienced were increasingly divergent realities. By 1943, the war had turned. Stalingrad had fallen. The Afrika Korps had surrendered. The skies over Germany, once the uncontested domain of the Luftwaffe, now swarmed with Allied bombers. Hanna Reitsch continued to fly, continued to test machines that promised miracles, rocket-powered interceptors, pilotless bombs, jets that could outrun anything the Allies fielded. But the factories that built these wonders were being destroyed faster than they could produce them. The fuel to power them was vanishing. The pilots trained to fly them were dying. Hanna did not see this as defeat. She saw it as a test of faith. The greater the adversity, the more necessary the devotion. When the Luftwaffe developed the V-1 flying bomb, a pilotless drone designed to strike London, she volunteered to test a manned version to prove that a human pilot could guide the weapon more accurately than a gyroscope. The aircraft was essentially a suicide weapon. She flew it anyway. She survived 3 test flights before the program was abandoned. She was disappointed. She had been willing to die. In 1944, she was summoned to meet Adolf Hitler. It was not their first encounter. She had met him at receptions, at demonstrations, brief exchanges where he praised her courage, and she felt the full force of his charisma. But this meeting was different. The Reich was collapsing. The Allies had landed in Normandy. The bomb plot of July 20th had revealed that even within the Wehrmacht, there were traitors who sought Hitler's death. The Führer was isolated, paranoid, surrounded by men who no longer believed in victory but feared to admit it. Hanna spoke to him of faith. She told him that the German people were ready to sacrifice everything, that they needed only his leadership, his will, his refusal to surrender. She believed this absolutely. She had no children, no husband, no ties beyond her devotion to flying and to the Reich. She could not imagine a world where Germany was defeated, where Hitler was gone. To accept such a future was to accept meaninglessness.
Hitler listened. He told her that she was one of the few who truly understood. He told her that Germany's enemies did not fight for ideals, but for material greed, for the soft comforts of democracy and capitalism. They had more planes, more tanks, more men, but they lacked the spiritual strength that came from total commitment. If Germany could hold, if the people could endure just a little longer, secret weapons would turn the tide. Victory was still possible. Faith would be rewarded. She believed him. Or perhaps she needed to believe him, because the alternative, that she had devoted her life to a cause that was not only lost but monstrous, was unthinkable. The evidence, of course, told a different story. By early 1945, the Reich's military situation was not merely dire, but apocalyptic. The Red Army had crossed the Oder River, less than 40 miles from Berlin. Allied forces had crossed the Rhine. German cities were rubble. The Luftwaffe, once the pride of the Wehrmacht, could barely muster a few dozen operational aircraft. Fuel stocks were exhausted. Pilot training had been reduced to a few hours of flight time. Boys of 15 and 16 were being handed rifles and told to hold positions against battle-hardened Soviet troops. The secret weapons Hitler spoke of, the Me-262 jet fighter, the Type 21 submarine, the V-2 rocket, were technological marvels, but they came too late and in too few numbers to alter the outcome. The factories that produced them were buried under Allied bombing. The infrastructure to deploy them was shattered. The war was over in all but name. Every general knew it, every aide whispered it, but no one dared say it to Hitler's face. Hanna Reitsch was immune to such realism. She had spent her life defying limitations, pushing past the boundaries of what was thought possible. Crashes that would have killed others, she survived. Machines that experts declared unflyable, she mastered. To her, statistics were irrelevant. Will was everything. If Germany lacked aircraft, then pilots would fly makeshift machines. If fuel was scarce, they would glide. If defeat seemed certain, then the German people would choose death over surrender, and in that choice, find a moral victory that transcended mere survival.
This was not the thinking of a soldier. It was the thinking of a fanatic. But it was also, in a twisted sense, the thinking of a true believer in the ideals Hitler had preached for over a decade. That life without struggle was meaningless, that defeat accepted was more shameful than death embraced, that the individual meant nothing and the cause was everything. She carried with her, always, a small cyanide capsule. It was standard issue for Luftwaffe personnel involved in sensitive operations, insurance against capture and torture. But for Hanna, it was more than insurance. It was a promise. She would never be captured. She would never betray. She would never live to see a world where Germany was defeated. The capsule was her final freedom, her last act of control. It was the symbol of her devotion. In April 1945, when Robert Ritter von Greim received Hitler's summons to Berlin, every rational officer advised against attempting the journey. The Soviets controlled the skies. Berlin was encircled. The city was a death trap. Von Greim hesitated. Hanna Reitsch did not. She insisted on piloting the flight herself. She told von Greim that if he did not go, she would go alone. She was not being dramatic. She meant it. They flew a Focke-Wulf FW-190 fighter to Rechtlin, then transferred to the smaller Feisler Storch, the only aircraft capable of landing on Berlin's improvised runways. The flight into the city was a gauntlet of anti-aircraft fire. Soviet gunners filled the sky with flak. Tracers arced upward in crisscrossing streams. The Storch, slow and fragile, should have been obliterated. Instead, it slipped through gaps in the barrage, weaving between explosions, descending toward the Tiergarten as shells burst close enough to rock the wings. Von Greim was hit. Blood sprayed across the cockpit. Hanna took the controls, landing the aircraft on a cratered street, the wings barely clearing the rubble. She helped von Greim from the cockpit, half carrying him toward the bunker entrance as Soviet shells screamed overhead. They descended into the earth, into the bunker, into the end of the world. Hitler greeted them with feverish energy. He promoted von Greim to commander of the Luftwaffe, a gesture both absurd and tragic. There was no Luftwaffe left to command. But Hitler spoke of plans, of relief forces, of divisions that would break the Soviet encirclement. Hanna listened, nodding, believing, or pretending to believe, because to doubt now would be to admit that everything, the sacrifices, the suffering, the faith, had been for nothing. And she made her request. Let me die first. Let me take the cyanide before you, mein Führer, to show that I am not afraid, to show that faith requires no reward. Let my death be proof that some still believe. Hitler refused. He told her gently that her death would serve no purpose. He told her that she was young, that she had skills the Reich might still need, that to throw away her life in the bunker was waste, not sacrifice. He told her that if she truly wished to serve, she would leave, she would survive, she would tell the world what happened here, would bear witness to the fact that Germany fought to the last, that its leaders did not flee, that they chose honor over survival. He gave her letters, messages to Admiral Dönitz, to various commanders, documents that no longer mattered, instructions for a war that was already over. He gave her his word that her loyalty would be remembered. And then he ordered her to fly out, to escape while escape was still barely possible. Hanna Reitsch, who had never disobeyed a direct order from Adolf Hitler, who had flown suicide missions without hesitation, who had come to Berlin expecting to die, was commanded to live. She wept, not from relief, but from anguish. To live was to be denied the final proof of her faith. To survive was to admit that she was not, after all, willing to sacrifice everything. She had asked for martyrdom and been granted exile. On April 28, 1945, Hanna Reitsch and Robert Ritter von Greim departed the Führer bunker. The flight out was even more desperate than the flight in. The Soviets had tightened the encirclement. The improvised runway in the Tiergarten was under constant bombardment. They took off in the early hours before dawn, the Storch's engine screaming as it struggled to gain altitude. Soviet searchlights locked onto them. Anti-aircraft fire erupted. The aircraft shook with each near miss. Hanna flew by instinct, pushing the Storch into a dive to evade the flak, then climbing sharply, skimming rooftops, weaving through columns of smoke. They cleared the city. They landed at Rechlin. Von Greim was evacuated to a hospital. Hanna, exhausted and injured, refused medical attention. She demanded to return to Berlin, to fly back, to complete the sacrifice Hitler had denied her. Officers restrained her. They told her the bunker had fallen silent. They told her it was over.
On April 30th, Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun committed suicide in the bunker. Their bodies were burned in a shell crater in the Chancellery garden. On May 2nd, Berlin surrendered. On May 8th, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The Third Reich, which had promised eternity, lasted 12 years. Hanna Reitsch was captured by American forces shortly after the war's end. She was interrogated for months. Intelligence officers wanted to know about Hitler's final days, about secret weapons programs, about her own role in the regime. She answered their questions with precision, but without remorse. She told them that Hitler had been a great man betrayed by lesser men, that Germany had fought honorably, that the Allies had won through material superiority, not moral righteousness. She refused to renounce her loyalty. She refused to apologize. She was never charged with war crimes. Unlike many of her contemporaries, she had not participated in atrocities, had not been involved in the machinery of genocide. She was a pilot, a technician, a fanatic, but not a murderer. She was released in 1946, a woman without country, without purpose, without the faith that had defined her existence. The years that followed were long and strange. Hanna Reitsch did not fade into obscurity. She rebuilt her life around the only thing she still understood: flying. She set new altitude records in gliders, won international competitions, traveled the world performing aerobatic demonstrations. She flew in India, in Ghana, in the United States. She wrote books, gave interviews, charmed audiences with her grace and her skill. She never married, she never renounced her past. When asked about Hitler, about the Reich, about the war, she spoke carefully. She acknowledged Germany's defeat, but not its guilt. She admitted that Hitler had made mistakes, but insisted that his vision had been noble, that his intentions had been pure. She spoke of the soldiers who had died believing in that vision and said their sacrifice had meaning, even if the cause was lost. She could not, would not accept that she had devoted her life to evil. To do so would be to unmake herself.
In interviews conducted decades after the war, she was asked directly, "Do you regret your loyalty to Adolf Hitler?" Her answer was always the same. Loyalty, she said, is not something one regrets. Loyalty is absolute. If it depends on outcomes, it is not loyalty, but opportunism. She had been loyal. She had been willing to die.
That Hitler had not accepted her sacrifice did not diminish its value. It only meant that she had been forced to carry the burden of memory, to live in a world that did not understand what she had believed or why. She died in 1979, at the age of 67, on the eve of her 68th birthday. The official cause was a heart attack, but there were rumors, unproven, persistent, that she had taken her own life, that she had finally consumed the cyanide capsule she had carried for over 30 years, that she had waited until the world had forgotten her, and then completed the sacrifice that Hitler had once denied. The capsule, that small glass vial of poison, no larger than a thumb, standard issue for those who flew in the service of the Reich. It was the symbol of everything Hanna Reitsch believed, and everything she could never escape. It represented absolute commitment, the refusal to be captured or broken, the final assertion of will over circumstance. But it also represented a deeper truth, that the ideology she served was not one of life, but of death. The Third Reich did not promise abundance or prosperity or freedom. It promised glory earned through suffering, meaning extracted from sacrifice, transcendence achieved through annihilation. In this, Hanna Reitsch was the perfect disciple. She did not join the Nazi Party, did not participate in rallies or purges, did not concern herself with racial theories or political schemes. She cared only about flying, about pushing beyond limits, about proving that will could overcome any obstacle. But in that single-minded devotion, she embodied the core of fascist belief, that struggle itself was the highest good, that submission to a great cause justified any cost, that death embraced was nobler than life compromised.
The Allies, particularly the Americans, offered a different vision. When American forces swept across Europe, they brought not only weapons but abundance. Soldiers handed out chocolate bars and cigarettes, chewing gum and nylon stockings. They drove trucks loaded with supplies that seemed inexhaustible. They spoke of freedoms and rights, of elections and law, of a system where individuals mattered, where prosperity was not won through conquest, but created through cooperation. To those who had lived under fascism's austerity, who had been told that sacrifice was virtue and want was strength, American abundance seemed almost obscene, too easy, too soft, lacking the purity of suffering. But it was real, and it worked. And it represented a truth that Hanna Reitsch could never accept, that a society built on freedom and material well-being could defeat one built on discipline and self-denial, that democracy, messy and inefficient as it was, could mobilize greater resources, inspire deeper loyalty, and achieve more lasting victories than any totalitarian state. Hanna carried her cyanide capsule until the end. She never used it in the bunker because Hitler commanded her to live. She never used it in the years after, perhaps because some part of her, buried deep, was not ready to surrender the possibility of redemption, the hope that history might one day vindicate her faith. Or perhaps she simply lacked the courage, in the end, to take the step she had once demanded to take first. The capsule was found among her belongings after her death. It had degraded over the decades, the poison inert, the vial cracked. It could no longer kill. It was just glass and residue, a relic of a war long over, a symbol of devotion that had outlived its meaning. Berlin today is a city of memorials. The Führer bunker is gone, buried beneath a parking lot. The Reich Chancellery is rubble. The Tiergarten, where Hanna Reitsch landed under fire in April 1945, is once again a park, green and peaceful, filled with joggers and tourists and children playing. The scars remain, buildings still pocked with bullet holes, gaps in the streetscape where bombs fell, but the city has rebuilt itself, not as a monument to past glories, but as a living organism, chaotic and diverse and free.
Hanna Reitsch has no monument. There is no statue, no plaque, no street bearing her name. She is remembered by historians as a footnote, a curiosity, a woman of extraordinary skill who devoted her talents to a monstrous cause. Her records, the altitudes she reached, the machines she tested, the flights she survived, are acknowledged but not celebrated. Her loyalty, once her greatest pride, is now her defining shame. And yet, her story is not without meaning. It is a reminder that courage is not inherently virtuous, that skill can serve evil as easily as good, that loyalty without moral judgment is not nobility, but blindness. Hanna Reitsch was brave. She was brilliant. She was disciplined and determined and willing to sacrifice everything for what she believed. But what she believed was wrong, and no amount of bravery or skill could change that. She asked Hitler to let her die first, to prove that her faith required no reward, that she could face annihilation without fear. He refused, not out of mercy, but out of pragmatism. He needed her to survive, to carry his messages, to bear witness. He denied her martyrdom because martyrs serve a cause, and the cause was already dead. He sent her into a world where her faith was meaningless, her loyalty a burden, her sacrifice unwanted. She lived for 34 more years. She flew, she competed, she traveled, she never apologized, and she carried always the small glass capsule that represented the choice she had been denied, the death she had been willing to embrace, the final proof of devotion that history had refused to accept. In the end, Hanna Reitsch's tragedy was not that she was willing to die for her beliefs, it was that she was forced to live with them, to see the Reich she loved vanish into ash, to watch the Allies rebuild Germany into something unrecognizable, prosperous, democratic, free, to realize slowly or all at once that the world she had fought for was not only defeated but unlamented, that the faith she had carried like a torch had illuminated nothing, that the sacrifice she had been ready to make would have been, like so many others, meaningless.
She asked to die first. Hitler said no. And in that refusal, he condemned her to the cruelest fate imaginable for a true believer: survival. To live in a world where her gods were dead, her cause forgotten, her loyalty remembered only as a cautionary tale. To carry the poison that could end her suffering, but never quite find the moment to use it. This is the story of Hanna Reitsch, a woman who flew higher than most men dared. A woman who believed so completely that she could not imagine doubt. A woman who asked for death and was granted life, and who spent the rest of her years wondering which was the greater punishment.